Hello, it's good to have you with us at this hour for our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. We start with the breaking news out of North Korea today and its claim that it successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. The claim has been met with some skepticism by experts who are still working to verify it. If confirmed, it will be North Korea's fourth nuclear test following ones in 2006, 2009, and 2013. The news has disrupted the peaceful mood that was set after last year's breakthrough talks that led to some improvements in inter-Korean ties. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's New Year's speech that seemed to suggest more efforts to improve ties were on the way. Today we will take a look at the situation and the possible repercussions for South Korea and the international community through a series of reports with our correspondents standing by at the Ministries of Defense, Foreign Affairs, and the Presidential Office, as well as an in-depth discussion with an expert. First, we go to our presidential office. Our correspondent Song Ji-sun is standing by. President Park chaired an emergency meeting of the National Security Council soon after the North's claim of a hydrogen bomb test, and the South Korean government released a statement on the situation. Ji-sun, what's the latest?
Good evening, Daniel. Regarding Pyongyang's claim of a fourth nuclear test, President Park Geun-hye said if it proves to be true, it's a direct challenge to South Korea's national security and posing threat to survival of its citizens. And President Park said the latest provocation has the potential to shake up the security landscape in Northeast Asia and stress the North must pay for its nuclear ambition and actions that go against international peace and stability. South Korea condemned Pyongyang and said a nuclear test would violate UN Security Council resolutions. It says it's seeking further sanctions toward denuclearizing Pyongyang in cooperation with the international community.
그동안 우리와 국제사회는 북한이 핵실험을 감행한다면 결코 묵과하지 않을 것이며 반드시 대가를 치르게 할 것임을 누차 경고해 왔습니다. 이제 정부는 국제사회와 긴밀한 협력하에 북한이 이번 핵실험에 대해 반드시 상응하는 대가를 치르도록 해야 합니다. 이를 위해서는 UN 안보리 등 국제사회의 강력한 제재는 물론 미국 등 동맹국과 우방국들의 단호한 조치를 이끌어내는 것이 중요합니다.
After evaluating the situation at the meeting, the top office discussed countermeasures vowing full readiness and defense against any North Korean provocations in alliance with the U.S. In her New Year's message, President Park had expressed her hope for reunification of the two Koreas, while also promising a stern reaction to any North Korean aggressions. In his New Year's message, North Korea leader Kim Jong-un had said the channel for dialogue is open, without saying much about the country's nuclear capabilities. Prior to that, however, Kim had made the claim that Pyongyang had developed an H-bomb. With the test today, the North claims to have become a nuclear state with a hydrogen bomb, although experts and Seoul's National Intelligence Service say the claim does not seem to be legitimate given the size of the tremors. Seoul and Washington both say they do not accept North Korea as a nuclear state and that Pyongyang should abandon its nuclear weapons in irrevocable and verifiable ways. President Park also called on politicians to end any ongoing political disputes and join forces to ensure the safety of the South Korean people. Daniel.
All right, thank you for that, Ji-sun. South Korea's defense ministry has rejected the North's claim to have detonated a hydrogen bomb. For more, we connect live with our defense ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin, standing by at the Ministry of National Defense. Hyun-bin, what can you tell us now?
Well, South Korea's defense ministry says it has upped its defense readiness and is keeping a close eye on any unusual movements north of the border. It's also working in close coordination with the United States. Let's hear what the defense ministry has to say.
North Korea's nuclear test destabilizes peace and security, not only on the Korean peninsula, but also in the international community. It also disregards the international community's attempts to denuclearize the peninsula.
Now, unlike with its previous nuclear test, Pyongyang did not notify the U.S. or China beforehand. South Korea's defense ministry says that North Korea is always capable of conducting a nuclear test at any given time. So it's hard to predict exactly when Pyongyang will conduct another nuclear test. The ministry says that it's unlikely that North Korea conducted a full-scale hydrogen bomb test, as an H-bomb is 100 to 1,000 times stronger than an atomic bomb, and added that it's hard to believe Pyongyang has obtained the technology. The recent blast was weaker than that, recording a 4.8 on the seismic graph, which is 0.1 lower than the nuclear test it conducted in 2013. He did say, however, there could be some hydrogen particles, but that isn't the full H-bomb. North Korea has conducted 4 nuclear tests so far in 2006, 2009, and 2013. I will have more updates in the later newscasts.
Thanks for that, Hyunbin. We will be looking forward to that. And how is Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry responding to the latest announcement coming from North Korea? We now connect live to our Connie Kim, who is standing by at the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Connie, what's the latest there?
Well, Daniel, at around 3:40 p.m., South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se met with Mark Lippert, the U.S. ambassador to South Korea, and General Curtis Scaparotti, the commander of the U.S. Forces Korea. Yoon reportedly explained Seoul's assessment of North Korea's nuclear test claim and called for close coordination between the allies' diplomatic and defense authorities. The three agreed to cooperate on maintaining a strong defense posture in light of the North's claim. Yoon is also reportedly in the process of talking with the foreign ministers of the U.S., China, and Japan. Now, earlier in the day, the ministry condemned Pyongyang for the nuclear test. Take a listen to what Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam had to say.
North Korea's provocation is a clear violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. In a situation like this, the Foreign Affairs Ministry sees a need for swift active measures.
Around 20 officials were at the meeting, including those who deal with the UN sanctions against North Korea and the Foreign Ministry's Director of Nuclear Non-Proliferation. The ministry said it will be maintaining its state of emergency and will take steps to ensure the safety of Korean citizens living abroad. As Hyunbin mentioned earlier in his report, the Foreign Affairs Ministry says an interesting factor here is that Pyongyang did not notify the U.S. or China in advance of the test. Now, this is a different pattern from the past when North Korea did let Washington and Beijing know it was planning to conduct a nuclear test.
Being its usual unpredictable self, well, Connie, how is the international community responding to the announcement from North Korea?
Well, North Korea may be finding itself more isolated in the international community. Now, China, Pyongyang's a longtime ally, issued a statement saying it strongly opposes the hydrogen bomb test conducted by North Korea. Beijing's Foreign Affairs Ministry urged Pyongyang to abide by its international obligations. The White House said it cannot confirm Pyongyang's hydrogen bomb claim, but it condemns any violation of UN Security Council resolutions that ban North Korea from nuclear tests. Neighboring country Japan said a North Korean nuclear test is a threat to Japan's security. And now taking this to a further level, at 11 a.m. on Wednesday in New York, that'll be 1 a.m. on Thursday in Korea, the United Nations Security Council will meet to discuss North Korea's claim. They're expected to condemn the test and discuss slapping sanctions against the regime. Looking at the past, it took between 5 to 23 days for the UN to slap sanctions on North Korea after previous tests. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, thanks for being out there for us, Connie. And now to help us dissect these disturbing claims from up north, we connect via phone for more analysis by an expert, Professor Kim Tae-woo, who is an invited professor at numerous universities, including Kanyang, and a former president of the Korea Institute for National Unification, is on the line for us. Professor Kim, thank you for joining us.
Yes, hello.
Well, first of all, there were speculations and signs leading up to this recent test. How prepared are we to deal with the situation if in fact the regime is H-bomb ready?
Well, I want to believe that my government has been ready because there has been many warnings that North Korea must have been developing the hydrogen bomb as well as boosted fusion bomb. So from now on, what the government should do is to disclose very specific policy reactions rather than just saying we are seeking response or some vague principles. Likewise, the Ministry of Defense should not just say we are watching closely. Rather than the ministry should reshape the deterrence strategy it has prepared against this situation. Likewise, the alliance, I don't want to listen again that we are cooperating closely. We want to listen to very specific reactions at the level of alliance. So Anyway, my government should be very prepared because this situation has been expected for a long time.
Right, we should be ready. More action to back up the talks we've had so far. And what specific new actions can the international community, including the U.S., especially the U.S. professor, can take after this drastic development from the regime?
Well, we can expect the U.S. actions into three directions. Bilaterally, U.S. will add another sanctions against North Korea. At the alliance level, as I told you, that they will seek ways to intensify allied response. Multilaterally, the United States will make a UN Security Council move further. However, the presidential election is just around the corner, and also U.S. government has been distracted by other issues like IS terrorism. So I don't know how specific actions we can expect from the United States. But anyway, U.S. is the key country that can deal with this situation.
Right, our strongest ally militaristically. And of course, sanctions and further isolations, that's been a repeated option so far. Are they as valid as they claim to be? How effective have they been in the past?
Of course not. Mainly two reasons, First of all, North Korea is not democratic countries. So the isolation and hardship imposed on its people is a secondary concern for its government, A second reason, it's China. We know that we have already 5 the UN Security Council resolutions, plus 2 chairman statements. This is really enormous international sanctions. Nevertheless, China has provided the bottom line assistance to help North Korean survival. That's the reason why the sanctions has not been so effective so far. So, in my opinion, the future effective sanctions should include unanimity, international unanimity, and very clear message that saying that the continuation of a nuclear weapon program will endanger the survival of North Korean regime itself. At the same time, international community should make China to substantially participate in the sanctions rather than just saying we are opposed. We oppose North Korean nuclear weapons.
I think the big problem now is that the international community assumed that this is a norm, including South Korea, when we have these provocations from North Korea. That's one big problem. And we've mentioned China being an X factor there. Let's talk about Japan. Does this turn of events give Japan a reason to further justify changes to its pacifist constitution, Professor?
Yes, of course. Last year, Japan failed to revise its constitution. But this situation will provide another momentum for the revision of its constitutions. But we should not forget that simultaneously this situation will give a new momentum for the betterment of South Korea-Japan relations. We all know the North Korea is developing ICBM and SLBMs, and we all know their submarine threat in the Sea of Japan, in Eastern Sea. So this situation will remind the necessity of Korea-Japan security cooperation to meet this situation in common.
Right, building together could be a good option for Japan in terms of changing their ways militaristically. Moving on, Professor, South Korea, they have been in the past, South Koreans have been somewhat numb or unconcerned about North Korean provocations. But do you think things will be different this time around? How much more adverse is this latest move from North Korea?
Oh, this is really adverse, It will become a challenge to international the nuclear order, and it will become a threat, a serious threat to international peace and stability in this region. And it will complicate the relations among nations in this region surrounding the Korean Peninsula. To South Korea, it will make South Korean military strategy face with unprecedented crisis. So it will raise a lot of controversies. But there will be voices, demanding South Korean bomb or demanding reintroduction of the U.S. tactical nuclear weapons. So this situation is really adverse to South Korean security.
Well, nonetheless, it's going to be a brand new chapter for the inter-Korean relations and the international community's relations with the regime. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Kim Tae-woo.
All right, bye-bye.
Well, moving on, North Korea claims it's a hydrogen, not an atomic bomb that it tested. But what exactly is the difference, and is it true? What the implication would it be if that is true? Our Kwon Jang-ho explains further.
Atomic bombs are also known as fission bombs, as they use nuclear fission reactions to set off an explosion. They employ pieces of enriched uranium or plutonium and shoot them together to cause a chain reaction, releasing a huge amount of energy. Hydrogen bombs or thermonuclear weapons are also known as fusion bombs because they require a fusion reaction between hydrogen isotopes. A fusion reaction is much bigger than that produced from a fission bomb, but it requires an enormous amount of energy to trigger it. This amount of energy can only be produced by a fission reaction. So in essence, an H-bomb requires an A-bomb inside it to set it off. The Hiroshima A-bomb dropped in Japan in 1945 was recorded to have released about 15 kilotons of energy and carried a blast radius of 1.6 kilometers. The minimum yield an H-bomb has is 1 megaton with a blast radius of around 30 kilometers. That's up to 100 times more powerful than an atomic bomb. The largest A-bomb to date was made by the US called the Ivy King, which has a yield of 500 kilotons. The largest H-bomb ever made was the Russian Tsar bomber, which had a yield of 50 megatons, 100 times more powerful than the Ivy King. An H-bomb is also said to have no potential upper yield limit, unlike the A-bomb. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Many experts in South Korea are speculating about whether or not North Korea actually conducted an H-bomb test. Our Lee-Soon tries to delve deeper into the real motive behind the test might have been, with one expert saying it's most likely a bluff.
North Korean affairs researcher Yang Uk says that Wednesday's test is no different from Pyongyang's third nuclear test in February 2013, meaning it's likely the North does not yet have a hydrogen bomb.
North Korea is basically telling the world to believe that it possesses a hydrogen bomb when it isn't even showing any evidence of the test, an H-bomb warhead, for example. No country in the world can believe that.
He said that if an H-bomb had been detonated, it would have left a crater in the ground, like the Soviet Union's Tsar bomb, a 50-megaton H-bomb that left behind a nearly 4-kilometer-wide crater when it was detonated in 1961. He added that the likely motive behind the test was political.
North Korea is trying to overstate Kim Jong-un's achievements as much as possible. Its objective is to strengthen its diplomatic position ahead of the ruling Workers' Party Congress, and it's trying to put itself in a stronger position for when it has to face neighboring countries.
The expert also says the North's statement that it will not give up its nuclear program as long as the U.S. continues its offensive strategies against Pyongyang could actually be a message from the North that it wants some kind of dialogue with the U.S. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Upon hearing the news, local financial markets remain jittery, and Seoul's economic policymakers held an emergency meeting this afternoon to gauge the impact of North's provocations. For more on movements in the market and results from the meeting, we go live to our Hwang Ji-hye at the nation's central bank. Ji-hye, let's first go over what senior officials discussed in the meeting today.
Daniel, temporary and limited impact is the kind of effect that they're expecting this time, seen after many other provocations by the North in the past, including previous nuclear tests on the South Korean economy. High-level officials from the Finance Ministry, the Bank of Korea, and Financial Services Commission came together for this meeting. Although they agreed that the impact will not be major and will likely prove short-lived, they cautioned over short-term volatility in local markets that could be prompted by additional provocations from the North. South Korea's central bank has also held a separate meeting on the latest threat, but came up with the same conclusion, putting markets at ease. Policymakers also pledged to keep a close eye on future movements in the market and run a 24-hour monitoring system.
So, Ji, how did the market close today?
Despite this news from the North, local shares managed to recover the losses they saw during the day right after the story broke, with the benchmark Kospi once dipping to the 1,912 level, but closing at 1,925.43, down just over 0.25% from the previous session. The tech-heavy Kosdaq actually ended up roughly 0.5% from Tuesday at 686 137.27. The Korean won slid against the greenback to the lowest point since September last year, hitting 1,197.9 a dollar from 1,188 at yesterday's close. The drop comes at a time when the local currency was already shaky due to the weakening Chinese yuan. This was Hwang Jie reporting live from the Bank of Korea.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll have more updates at 10 p.m. Korea time.